So for Cricutmas Day 6, we have the knife blade. Now, the knife blade is something that I've been wanting to get hold of for quite a while, and I'm super excited that I finally have it. I've tried it out with a few projects, and I really love it. If you're not sure what the knife blade is, the Cricut knife blade is essentially an X-Acto knife for all of your heavier, thicker materials. So something that you wouldn't quite be able to cut with your normal fine point blade, that you would use the X-Acto knife for. Now, the knife blade is only compatible with the Cricut Maker and the Cricut Maker 3. So if you don't have those machines, then unfortunately you will need to upgrade before you'll be able to use this awesome blade. And the main reason for that is because of the drive housing. The Cricut knife blade requires a significant amount more pressure exerted onto the blade or exerted down onto whatever you're going to be cutting in order for it to cut properly, which is why the Explore can't, and other machines, I suppose, can't cut with this blade. Because the Cricut Maker and the Maker 3 are the machines that have that pressure ability, or the ability to kind of, cut things much heavier. It's said that they use up to 10 times more pressure on the knife blade, obviously because if you think about it, you're cutting, much heavier substrates, so that kind of makes sense. Now, a couple of things to remember when you're starting off with your knife blade. It is recommended to calibrate your machine before you're using the knife blade. Not gonna lie, when I used it the first time, I didn't do this. Probably won't take you very long, so in all honesty, it's probably worth it. Another thing you're going to have to remember to do is to move the little star wheels all the way to the side of the bar, because obviously you're cutting with much thicker materials, so that's going to be rolling over and you're going to be having clearance issues on that. You may have also seen people using the knife blade, and most of the time people tape the media down onto the mat that they're going to be using. Now obviously you have to use the strong grip mat with a knife blade, but it is still recommended to tape the media down as you're doing multiple passes to cut something, and something is much more likely to go wrong if you don't have like extra safeguards in place. So in all honesty, in my opinion, take an extra few seconds, tape that stuff down to make sure that you're not going to have any heartaches with your material and waste any kinds of materials that you're busy cutting. I also did notice the first few times that I'd used the knife blade is that it does obviously, because now you're going over and over and over and over again so many times, you do tend to cut into your mat a little bit more, or at least a little bit more densely than what you would on a normal cut. So it's in my mind that you will probably go through mats a little bit more frequently than what you would for, your normal cuts. And of course it makes sense because the knife blade is much bigger and sharper than the other blades. So the chances of you always getting exactly the perfect cut and not cutting deeply into your mat is quite slim. So I think mentally prepare yourself, not that you're going to go through a new mat every project, but I mean it may take you a couple of months to go through a mat as opposed to being able to save your mat for an entire year. But potentially with, better care of your mats, you may be able to avoid this. So it's just my kind of initial perceptions. I'll update at some point with another video in the future once I've used it far more extensively and let you know. So as I mentioned before, the knife blade uses multiple passes to cut something, which is why it's able to cut heavier materials like, heavy leather, we've got chipboard, we've got balsa wood, all of those kinds of materials. I have also heard stories of people cutting acrylic with the knife blade. Obviously we're talking Perspex acrylic, but full disclaimer here, many people did struggle a lot with cutting the much thicker materials. So obviously the thinner acrylic, I'm talking under a millimeter thick, you'd probably be able to cut, I hesitate to say relatively easily, but obviously many passes. But the other materials like, you wouldn't be able to cut a 2.4 millimeter acrylic with a knife blade. Well, you probably could. It would probably take you about a day and a half to get through it, and you'd probably end up like seriously messing up the knife blade. So again, this is all theoretical. I haven't confirmed it. I'm not sure if it's actually going to be worth it. It's probably far easier, quicker, and cheaper to get something laser cut. But if you're wanting to cut, like 1 millimeter acrylic, or half a millimeter acrylic, or up to maybe 1.5 millimeters acrylic, you could probably get away with it. But I would probably stick to the thinner acrylics with a knife blade if that's what you're going for. What I did really like about using the knife blade was that there were safeguards in the Design Space app for cutting through your mat. So I was cutting the heavy chipboard, and it said that it wanted to do 24 passes. But what it did was it actually stopped automatically after 8 passes, and it wanted you to kind of make sure that the media hadn't cut all the way through, and it wanted you to then click continue. So that was really nice, as at 8 passes it had pretty much cut through. So if it had continued on the other 16 passes, then potentially it would have actually cut through the mat. So don't worry too much. I haven't tested every material, so I'm not 100% sure if it does this for every single one. I'm pretty sure it would, but you know, it's at least a nice safeguard, so that if you're a little bit worried about using the knife blade and cutting straight through your mat, you may not have this problem. But just make sure that you're always cutting on the correct setting for what material you're actually cutting. Or if you select acrylic and you're cutting leather, you know, you're going to have some problems coming in there. Something else that you would have to remember about the knife blade is that your knife blade is not going to cut something in 30 seconds. So your knife blade obviously makes, like I've said a couple times, you know, it makes multiple passes, which means that it follows the same cut line over and over and over and over again. So these projects will take significantly longer to complete. The blade also doesn't move as fast as what it would on other materials, like vinyl as an example. So not only are you doing more passes, but the blade is moving slightly slower, which means that these will then obviously take much longer. And as a result of that, you are unable to use the knife blade with the Design Space app unless you're using it on a computer, like I did. Because if you think about it, somebody like me would start a project on her phone, you know, and then kind of walk off and forget that I'm actually busy, or that the phone needs to be, you know, within range of the machine to cut. So me being the silly lost corp that I am, you know, Cricut have kind of thought of people like me, which I really appreciate, and they only allow you to use it with your computer. You can still use it over Bluetooth, so that is great, that is an advantage, but you're obviously unable to use it on your phone or on your tablet, unfortunately. And the last thing that you would have to remember about the knife blade is that, very much like the rotary blade, they do have kind of minimum recommended cut sizes. So as an example, you wouldn't be able to cut a circle that was like teeny tiny, because it's a very thick, big blade, so it actually needs space to move around. And if it's cutting too much of a tiny circle, it doesn't have enough space for the actual physical blade itself to rotate. So that's kind of where a lot of your problems come in with, you know, like I said, the rotary blade and with the knife blade as well, is that you have to think about much bigger projects. You aren't going to be able to get those small, intricate cuts with a knife blade. So you have to think about the type of project that you're going to make. I made these little peace signs and little hand peace signs for my year-end function. It was a 70s theme, so this worked quite well. You'd probably be able to cut smaller than this, so I wouldn't worry too much about, you know, cutting the huge things only. But I would definitely recommend not wanting to cut super tiny intricate things with the knife blade, as it just won't be able to do it properly. So I hope that this video was helpful, and I hope it's, you know, one of the things that's helped you consider buying a Maker or a Maker 3, because the knife blade is super cool. It allows you so many different things, so many different options of, you know, things that you can make and whatnot. It's pretty much one of the reasons why I wanted the Maker, because I want to be able to cut the fun things every now and then. So stick around for more Cricut and craft related videos in the future, and I'll see you in my next video. And remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon.